Welcome to the More You Know, where we debunk all the myths behind disabilities. Today, I have my good friend Jessica here. Hi, Jessica. Good to see you.
Hey, you too.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I'm like any ordinary girl, honestly. I just I'm a sign language interpreter full time, and I'm a Zumba instructor, group fitness instructor part time. I have to have my escape from the real world sometimes, but as a sign language interpreter, I get to do a little bit of everything that I love. So it's definitely not work for me, thankfully. Very lucky to say that. I always live by that. Do what you love and you won't work. It doesn't feel like work pretty much, right? So, but that's really it. I mean, I just try to enjoy what I do, as I'm also helping and working with different individuals like yourself, which is a great opportunity because I love what you guys do. I think it's very important for the disability community as a whole because not a lot of people know about it. Unfortunately, it is small, but it's actually bigger than we think. And I just wish people were more open to that. So I'm just happy to be here and explain anything else that you are curious to know. But that's pretty much it about me.
What motivated you to become an interpreter?
Well, I was always a dancer before I even knew about sign language. Like most of us don't know that sign language is a thing or deaf culture is a thing. So, like everyone that I've met along the way has no idea about the deaf community in general. So, before that, I was dancing a lot. In high school, I did theater, I did a little bit of performance. That was always my biggest thing. And then I needed another language credit in high school, and I saw a friend of mine. I'll never forget. I saw a friend of mine interpreting a song. Back then was like a big deal for like the midterm or the final. Um, and I was like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you throwing hands in the air? Like, what's going on?" And I didn't know it was sign language. So she said, "Oh yeah, the teacher's deaf here, and you can take the class as a foreign language. Not really foreign, but it counts." So I ended up meeting the deaf teacher, and I was curious. I mean, with what I know now makes sense, but knowing then, I didn't know, how does a deaf person teach a class? Um, so I met him and we just hit it off. He was really impressed at how quick I learned. I took his class the following year, my junior and senior year, and then he kind of took me under his wing because I caught on so quickly. As a visual learner through dance and theater, it kind of just, I caught on and I learned it really well. I was always social, and from high school on, studied it, got a degree in it, and here we are.
That's amazing. I mean, my mom is a teacher, so I always love stories where teachers inspire their students so much. I mean, that was a life-changing thing for you, and I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. As you've been interpreting, have there been any stories along the way or things that you've learned? Because I mean, like you said, you came from not much of a background of knowing about sign language. What kinds of things have you learned with it?
I've learned little things to really important kind of common sense things that a lot of people don't think is common sense. The biggest one is being called deaf versus the professional term that we in the hearing world use, hearing impaired. It's actually an offensive term to the deaf culture, which was definitely probably the biggest shock to me because in our world, we think it's a professional, like non offensive term, but it's actually offensive. And that was a shock to me at first, but something as little as that to uh, understanding that these people are literally regular human beings. They make phone calls just like we do daily. I've interpreted 911 calls. I've interpreted uh, passing of family members, having to call their family members. So just realizing that they're very much like anyone, and how we treat them differently should not be done. And then also learning that we all can go deaf any day and we would be in trouble because none of us in majority of the world doesn't know sign language. And then as far as 90% of deaf individuals are born into hearing families. So no one deaf in their family, but they're the first deaf born in the family generation. So things like that. I mean, it really ranges to really shocking information, to unfortunate information, but that's why we have sign language interpreters. That's why we're there to be an advocate, not really a helper in a sense, but we're there to also advocate for them as well as break those language barriers. So it ranges, it really does.
is there things that everyone can do, even if you don't know sign language? Like, what are some things that we can do just to make the world more accessible?
As far as the deaf community goes, from what I know, just be willing to treat them like anyone else. You don't have to yell at them. You actually look crazy if you do that. Like they even say that. They're like, you don't need to yell. And a lot of people don't read lips. A lot of deaf people don't read lips. Like 30% of our English grammar is mouths exactly the same. So like cat, bat, all those kind of like similar terms look the same. So to assume that they read lips is not a good thing either. So in that sense, just be patient when communicating with people who don't understand your language, writing back and forth, as simple as that. But always know that they have a right to communication and you have to communicate with them. So just be patient, be open to understanding how to accommodate that, because it's actually illegal not to provide an interpreter in any language, not just sign language. And a lot of agencies and companies still don't know that. So deaf people kind of give up at some point. And then until they get sued, things change. So it's kind of like just be willing and be open to understand a disability as a whole. And be willing to work with that person, not just assume right off the bat that it's not going to work or they can't do this, they can't do that, because that's always the misconception, and for all disabilities.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I feel like so many times accessibility is very easy, but it's often thought that it's really hard. And that's why a lot of
Yeah.
companies don't do it. That's why, they don't know that they have to do certain things.
Or
And
expensive. They don't want to
yes,
pay for it, which is a
yes.
huge, huge issue. And they don't know that majority of that is covered, or they
Mhm.
don't want to do the research. So I don't know how to change that, but we can only consider, hey, here's a website, here's a phone number, here's this, here's the legal act that says you have to, so it's always a barrier for me as an advocate, and for you, I'm sure too, to kind of find where that advocacy lies and like where that accommodation can be found, because for sign language, it's very rare. So I can't even imagine for the other disabilities that we have out there.
Yeah, I like to think that people want to learn. I think they just don't always know how, or they don't know
Right.
what they don't know.
Right.
So I think, that's why we do things like this, is we try
Mhm.
to spread that knowledge. But I
Mhm.
love this because honestly, I'm someone who does not know a whole lot about sign language and about interpreting. And I think just hearing these kinds of things opens my eyes so much. So hopefully
Yeah.
it does that for other people too.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely has opened my eyes just every day. Every day I learn something new. Every day I learn a new sign. Every day I realize there's an accent in a different state, or I sign something different in a different state, which is a thing. It's grammar, it's structure, it's language. So same here. You always never stop learning, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You said there's different accents and different. I never would have thought of that. Like I just learned something new. I never would have
Yeah.
thought about the different accents that
Yeah.
would be in sign language.
Hmm. Definitely accent, slang, attitude, facial expressions. Sometimes they'll sign something and expect me to know it at the call center that I work for the deaf. And I'm like, excuse me, I don't know that sign. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. And then they'll spell it until they realize, oh yeah, this person doesn't know me. But that's a whole nother learning experience too. But yeah, there are definitely accents out there and it's hard.
But I think that's great though, because you're not going to be punished if you don't know something. And I think that's another thing, that people aren't so accessible because they're afraid that if they don't know something, they're gonna look silly or stupid. And that's just not the case. We all don't know things, but people are willing to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you didn't know that. Let me help you figure it out." And I think that's great.
Right. I mean, just every day in video relay where I work, um, just that alone is a category that no one knows is a real thing. They think there's still TTY, which is typing. That's ancient history, but a lot of deaf people still have it, like the older generation. So it's one of those that we have relay and we introduce ourselves as the interpreter, but we're not a third party. We're just like an accessive device. And then a lot of companies don't want to pursue with the call because they think it's not confidential. So we have to, it's just a lot of educating. And then they try to find research before they continue the call, but there's literally a caller on the screen waiting to continue their call. So we have to be able to mediate that. Like, hey, so we have someone waiting. I promise you, this is not illegal. I can read the governmental, like, people just really don't know. And so as interpreters, we have to understand that our world, we used to be there. I used to be there, and we have to try to work around how to help and give those websites, give those phone calls or those numbers that they can reach out to and find out more, So I've been there.
I feel like this is a silly question, but when I used to facilitate at Disney, there was a class that I had where I had an interpreter in there. And I was always really nervous because I was afraid, like, oh, am I talking too fast? Or I don't want to overlap. Or do you ever run into that? Like, is that difficult to try and listen
Every
and
day.
interpret? That's gotta be so hard.
Every day. No, the reps in my ear are always like, please stop me if I'm reading too fast. I have to read this disclaimer. Slowing down is actually worse. So
Okay.
like, if we tell you to slow down, we will let you know, whether that be because our deaf client is a different language level, because they may not be high advanced vocabulary. And we actually have to make it simpler, because English grammar or English terminology is not an ASL. It's very simple. Whatever energetic, happy, excited, those terms mean, it's one sign, happy. It's not, oh, I feel thrilled, I feel ecstatic, I'm happy. It's the same sign. So, and a lot of people don't know that either. It's very simplified, very visual. So maybe my caller or client, our client, I should say, had grown up with home signs, which is just pointing to things or what it looks like, shaping it in space. Okay. And then I'm starting to figure it out, but this person doesn't know. So they start saying, like, oh, because they hear me like speaking to myself or like stopping them several times, because I'm realizing, oh, okay, this, and I can't tell them that. That's not their need to know. That's my job, So it's kind of like that weird gray area where, like, oh, do you mind? Let me just rephrase that for your, yeah, actually, hold on 1 second for the interpreter. And then, so it's kind of just like, if you see it, like you have seen it in the actual room, it's different because you can see us and you can see the client as well responding. But over the phone, we'll definitely tell you. We'll tell you, okay, give me 1 second. Let me rephrase that because I, the interpreter, don't understand. Hold on. But in a room, that's not a bad question. I mean, even though you can see it and you're not used to it, we get it. That's totally understand. But actually talk normal like you would, and always talk to them. And if they're not getting it, you'll see it. And then we will be, or should at least tell you, give us a second. Let me make sure because they'll probably answer in a way that doesn't make sense to me. So I'll be like, nope, that's not the answer you're looking for. Hold on 1 second. And that's kind of how we go from there. But that's not a stupid question. We get it every day.
Where do you think we can grow as far as accessibility goes?
What I've noticed recently is that there's not enough training when there's like the HR training, which I believe is where accommodations comes from. There's no specific training for HR to discuss disabilities, at least not enough. It just says, if you need an accommodation, please let us know, call this number. But I don't see an actual training, or I have never interpreted an HR related training to where they get specific about the kinds of accommodations, why they need the accommodations, if not, what happens. Support those people that want to work there, even help those people with disabilities get the job, like, I definitely just feel like we should all be allies. We should all educate ourselves more, realize that people with disabilities can't do what we do. I mean, that's it. There's like nothing to it, it just doesn't make sense to me to think anything else besides, oh, I don't want to pay for it. We don't need to pay. But the accommodation is not just for them. And I don't think they understand that either. So hopefully things will get better, and hopefully we have more things to talk about so we can spread it out there and get people more engaged to support and be an ally as well.
Absolutely. We always want more allies for the community. And
Definitely.
I really do appreciate the time you spent with us today talking about what you do. like I said, I've learned a lot today. I'm so excited to have learned so much, and I just can't wait to keep learning from you and the rest of our community, and just keep growing together. So thank you so much.
Definitely.